Swagatang Awuso. Welcome, friends. Today, we are going to look at how to form some simple sentences in Pali. Now, simple does not mean unimportant. We're going to get to a simple sentence that I think Buddhists say every day, taking refuge. But we're just talking about grammatically simple sentences. And we're just going to draw upon what we talked about in our video on nouns and verbs. And actually in the nouns, we're limiting ourselves to two cases here. The first, remember the Indian grammarians number their cases, or nominative, that's how we talk about them in the West maybe. The names are derived from Latin, nominative meaning subject, and the second or accusative case, singular and plural. These are the endings we've seen. Now, by the way, these aren't the endings for every type of noun, just the nouns in this class. And as we go along in Pali, as you go along, we'll come across other families of nouns that have different endings. And then, our verbs here, also singular, plural, first, second, third. I'm sticking with the Western tradition of first, second, and third. Remember, the Indian grammarians flip this. This would be first down here. But we'll just keep this consistent consonant with our the way that we would talk about Latin, Greek, or Spanish, or English. And these are the endings here. So, and don't let these parentheses be an issue. I've just put them here because verbs, just like nouns, there are other families of verbs. And some of them you're not going to see this A. That's all that means. So let's take a noun like Tathāgato. Now we've probably all come across that in Buddhism. It sometimes is not translated. If it's translated, sometimes you'll see that it's translated as the thus gone or the thus come, depending on one's perspective on what this ending actually means, whether it's from the verb come or go. Whether we say come or go, it usually is like one who's gone to thusness, one who's passed beyond the appearance of reality and has arrived at real reality, we might say. So Tathāgato, and if we look at the ending here, we'll see that we have this O, and that is characteristic of our singular first or nominative case. That means this will be the subject. And then we might have a verb like this, Tathāgato basati. Now this verb means to speak. And if we look at the ending here, we'll see that it's the T ending, and that's the third person singular. We have a singular noun subject, and we would expect the verb also to be singular, third person. This is not I or you. This is a third person. It would be he, she, or it if there was no subject. But in this case, it is. The subject is specified. The Tathāgato is speaking. Now, we might even come across something like Tathāgato dhammang basati. And if we look at this word here, even if we don't know what the meaning is, we could see that it has this ending, singular ending, second or accusative case, and that means it's going to be the object of the verb. So the Tathāgato is speaking or speaks the Dharma, the truth, the teaching, the doctrine. This word has many, many meanings. You may know that. The Sanskrit equivalent of this word is Dharma. And depending, I don't know if it's fair to say that if Mahayana Buddhists use this word, they're going to typically say Dharma, and Theravada Buddhists will say Dhamma if it's left untranslated. This word, like Tathāgato, can be left untranslated. And so you'll hear it both ways depending upon kind of the source. So Tathāgato dhammang vasati. A simple sentence, but not unimportant. Now, you might not see this, but we could reorder this. If we had a sentence like dhammang Tathāgato vasati. That would mean the very same thing. Here, the emphasis, though, would be put on the Dharma, the truth, the doctrine the Tathāgato is preaching. That's what the Tathāgato is talking about or is speaking. And so we could shift these words around, but this first one is really the main kind of Pali prose that we would see. Now, we could say something like, let's say, we'll take a case here. Let's say something like, Buddhaṃ gacchāmi. Now, if we look at this ending, we'll see that it corresponds to this verb. And I started this time with the verb, but we could go either way, but you'll see why I started with the verb here in a minute. Gacchāmi, this was in our verb video, means to go. With this ending, it means I go. And Buddhaṃ, if we look at this ending, we're going to see that it's here again, second singular, second case or accusative case, the object. So something to keep in mind in Pali is that when you're going someplace, like the destination of motion is actually put in this case. In English, we say, I'm going to the Buddha. In Pali, you say, I go Buddha. Kind of like you could say, I go home, or I'm going home. I'm going Buddha. Now, I'm not saying that when we translate it without to. I'm just saying that in Pali, they don't use a preposition there, and it's treated as an object. You're going to the object. I go to the Buddha. Here, the Buddha is emphasized. It's, the verbs usually come last, so we're hearing Buddhaṃ gacchāmi. Now, let's see if I can remember how to spell this. Is it sadhanam? Someone can correct me. My spelling in English is bad, so it's even worse in Pali. Oh, it's probably actually better in Pali. Buddhaṃ sadhanam gacchāmi. Now, we might have heard this. I was talking about how you can Buddhists worldwide chant taking refuge in the chant the three refuges. So now this is kind of an interesting thing. Here we're saying, I go to the Buddha, and then we have this other ending here, which we'll take to be accusative, singular. Technically, I think this is a neuter noun, so this could even be nominative, but it can't be nominative here because of this subject. So when you get a situation like this, I go to the Buddha, a refuge. In other words, this noun is describing this noun. The technical jargon is they're in apposition. It's kind of like an adjective, but you're using a noun. So I go to the Buddha. We could even say in this case, my refuge. And again, this isn't how the Pali is expressing it, but in English, we might even express this as I take refuge in the Buddha. Now that's freer, but that is probably the way English would express that more naturally. But that isn't how the Pali expresses it. And we do want to pay attention to how the Pali is expressing this. If that seems confusing, it won't at some point. I did want to throw it out there just because you can see this sort of thing. I think there's another one Warder has. But we'll skip. We'll actually, yeah, I'm going to leave that to the side because we're just going to stick with these kind of verbs. Now, I do want to bring up just one last instance. Um, we could say something like just what we were saying is, let me put that on a new line. Buddho Tathāgato bhavati. Excuse me. So this verb, let's skip to the verb here. After a while, you probably see this looks kind of like a verb, has this T ending. This verb means to be or is. So it's our third person singular. And notice here, it looks like we have two words that could be subjects. And what is going on in this instance is that when you have a verb like to be, it doesn't take an object. So in this case, we have this subject Buddho, and we're saying that the Buddha is Bhavati Tathāgato. The Buddha is a Tathāgata. And you might say, well, hey, what if Tathāgata is the subject? So it could be that Tathāgata is a Buddha. I would think that usually what's put first is going to be the subject in this case. I could be wrong about that. But either way, the meaning isn't likely to change. And by the way, just since these are both in the nominative case, the one that we're saying is not the subject would be called the predicate nominative, if you've ever heard of that. It might sound like a scary word, but it just means that it's a nominative case that's describing the subject. So, and one last feature about Pali is you don't need, because of the cases, and we know these are nominatives, you could very often just see this, Buddho Tathāgato. The Buddha is a Tathāgata. So I hope that is somewhat helpful, and if it's confusing, it's because I've made it confusing. It's not, the Pali isn't really confusing. And please, as always, let me know if if I've made some sort of drastic error here. And if you have any questions, I hope your journey in Pali is going well. Please join us for the Summer Pali Reading Group. It can be done online or in person. And I hope you have a great day. Peace.